Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome back to lecture 7 on public finance, which is MPA 405. We have gone a long way up to lecture 7 after establishing a criteria, for example, for evaluation of government action in the economy, after establishing the importance of the subject of public finance. I hope by now you are clear how important public finance is, not just for like students of MPA or students of finance or maybe the students of economics. It is important to understand the actions of the government for each and every individual, because it has an effect on not only the aggregate economy but also on the welfare of individuals at micro level. Now, while going through the previous lecture number 6, we discussed the topic of public goods and different aspects of public goods. We created our understanding for pure public goods and pure private goods. Pure public goods we defined as goods which are non-rival in nature and which are non-excludable. Non-excludable meant that those goods which are for whose use cannot be excluded for everyone. Like if as an example, we took national defense and we said that national defense, if it is for like few people in the economy, its use would be enjoyed by everyone else in the economy. Then it was also non-rival because its use by one individual would not diminish its use or utility derived by all the other individuals. Then we moved on to pure private goods, which we said that private goods are those goods which mostly do not have any externality. I hope you understand the concept of externality by now. That is the effect either in terms of cost, which is negative externality, or in terms of benefit, which is positive externality. We said that private goods, pure private goods, have no externality and they are often rival, and they are low cost excludable in the sense that it is very easy to exclude individuals who are not willing to pay for it. Then but pure public goods like for example national defense and for example air pollution, or I mean cleaner and drinking water and cleaner air, would mean that there is no exclusion and there is no rivalry, and the external benefits are a lot for use of that good. Then we took it further along and we discussed, for example, that marginal cost for providing or distributing more public goods is zero, and at the cost at which it is being provided to one or a group of individuals initially, it would be the same cost for distributing it to more individuals, again giving the example of national defense and cleaner air. Then we also established that for the production of more units of pure public good, there would be, we assume that there is a constant average cost, and we assume that then it would be a constant marginal cost. Like if you build one unit for $200, for 2 units you would have to pay like $400. Then we later on we established that we established 4 categories. On the top was, on 2 extremes was pure private good and pure public good, and in between there were price excludable public goods, and these are the goods for exclusion is possible but they are non-rival in nature. We also before that actually we discussed that it is not always necessary that non-rival goods are also non-excludable goods. So then after defining the second category, we defined a third category of goods. The third category of goods would be congestible public goods, in which the use congested the utility derived for other individuals who are already using it, and increase the marginal cost of extending that goods availability to more individuals up to a certain level. Then these goods were, for example, non-rival in nature, but they were again excludable also. Then we defined the pure public good, which we had already defined, and for this definition, to create the difference between pure public and pure private good, we had an example of bread and heat. Bread was a pure private good in which its use was rival and it was non-excludable. It was excludable, and for pure public good, we defined heat, that if these two are given to like a group of individuals in a room, it would clearly define which one is the public good and which one is the private good. And then we moved on to had a discussion on schooling as a pure as a good which is being provided by public sector institutions and private sector institutions. We also discussed that it is very difficult to generalize the means of production and distribution of these pure public and pure private, and in between the price excludable and congestible goods. We also defined certain examples. We defined the certain modes of production. We defined the certain modes of financing that production and distribution. We said that if it is being done by the government, mostly it would be through taxes, and if it is being sold privately, it would be through, for example, revenues from sales. So having that gone through, we discussed that public and private goods and the basic concepts behind them. Now moving on, this lecture would again be revolving around the public and private goods, and we would be basically starting by defining the demand for a pure public good. Now, demand for a pure public good starts from the difference between the demand for a pure private good and how it is derived, and then how demand for a pure public good is derived. Now, basically, we would take this analysis in terms of example shown through a graph. In the first case, there is demand for a private good. Now let's take this example as for number of loaves of bread produced per week. On the x-axis, there is loaves of bread purchased per week by individuals, or in other words, basic simple microeconomic analysis in which there is quantity demanded on the bottom x-axis, and then on the y-axis there is price of a loaf of bread in terms of dollars. Now there are shown, first focus on the three demand curves represented by DA, DB and DC. These, let's assume that A, B, C are three individuals. This downward sloping demand curves represents that that how much he would be willing to pay, how much he would be willing to use at different price levels. That's why it is a negatively sloping demand curve. Demand curves are negatively sloping because they represent that higher the price, lesser quantity would be used or bought or consumed or demanded. Now DA is a downward sloping demand curve representing that at a given price how much the individual would consume. It is equal to marginal benefit that is derived by A. Now DB, which is marginal benefit derived by B, that is again a downward sloping demand curve representing at a given price how much he would purchase or demand. So would be DC, which is marginal benefit to the individual C. Now how do we for example calculate the demand curve of all these individuals together? That would actually be the horizontal summation of individual demand curve at the given prices. Now let us assume that this is a perfectly competitive market structures graph and with a constant marginal cost and average cost curves. Now this is a private good, which is bread, and bread is a private good because it is excludable at very low cost. You can exclude individuals who are not willing to pay for it and only finance those individuals who would be paying for that use of that or consumption of that good. And it is also rival in nature, which was a characteristic of pure private goods. Rival in nature would mean that if given a limited supply, if A, for example, consumes a quantity, then it would reduce the quantity for B and C. So that is again it creates a rivalry. So in this case, let's assume that the price is determined at 3. So at price 3, three different quantities, DA would be requesting for 1 loaf of bread, and B would be demanding like 2 loaves of bread, and C would be demanding 3 loaves of bread. So at that given price, the market demand curve or the total demand curve for that private good would be horizontal summations of these demand curve. Now 1 plus 2 plus 3 is equal to 6, and that is represented by this demand curve, which is equal to summation of QD, that at price 3 there would be a market demand curve of total number of 6 loaves of bread. Then equilibrium point would be at the point where marginal social benefit would be equal to marginal social cost, which is represented by a line parallel to x-axis, S or the supply curve, and marginal cost is equal to AC, and marginal cost is equal to marginal cost of production of all the resources being employed to make that good available for the consumers, and that is why that is marginal social cost. So in this private good scenario, the demand for the private goods is determined by the market forces, in which marginal social benefit is equal to marginal social cost at point E, and that would be the market equilibrium actually. Now in terms of demand for the pure public good, the scenario changes a little bit. Now let us see how the scenario would change. On the x-axis, assume that there is a little community of 3 individuals. We would take this example to discuss many other concepts. So let us focus on what this scenario that has been created is actually. Now the scenario is that there are 3 individuals in a community who demand there is an option that they need to hire security guards for protection, right? So on the x-axis is the security guards per week that are demanded by these individuals, and their demand for this pure public good, it is a public good. Why hiring a security guard is a public good? Because if there are 3 individuals, A, B and C, and if A hires a security guard in this community, then in that case that security guard would be providing a positive externality towards B and C also. So it is a pure public good in which A cannot control the use of that public good. It cannot exclude B and C from that public goods use. So it is a pure public good in this our example, and let us keep assuming that hiring of security guards of a local by a local community of 3 individuals would be a pure public good. So the x-axis represents the security guards per week being hired by those 3 individuals, A, B and C, and the downward sloping demand curves are shown over here, which gives the marginal benefit of A and marginal benefit of B and marginal benefit of C. Now the y-axis is a little different from the y-axis that we previously saw. On the previous case, when we were measuring the demand curve, trying to calculate the total demand for a private good, on x-axis was the quantity demanded, which is the same in case of pure public good, but in case of pure private good, on y-axis there were price of the good, that at a given price how much quantity they would be demanding. But in this case of a public good, the y-axis a little different. It represents the marginal benefit that they would derive in dollar values of using that given public good in a given quantity. So y-axis are a little different. So instead of marking market prices, they are the maximum amount of that people are willing to pay for that given quantity of the pure public good. So each individual, considering the marginal benefit that he derives, each individual would have a different his marginal benefit. He would rate his marginal benefit at a different value, and that is how the y-axis contains the marginal benefit. So in this scenario, if you see that, for example, Now, almost individual A considers that his marginal benefit would be around $350. Individual B's marginal benefit is around $250, and individual C's marginal benefit for one security guard would be around $200 in terms of dollars. So the total demand in terms of marginal benefit achieved by this community for one security guard would be around $750. We would do this example mathematically also, but in order to understand the concept, that over there in that case we were summing up the total quantity demanded, not the prices, because the price was given for that product, and at that given price the quantity was being summed up to derive the market demand curve. But in this case the scenario is a little different in terms of a pure public good, because on the y-axis there is the marginal benefit or the price that people are willing to pay in terms of the benefit they derive for a given quantity of public good. So if that is the case, then since the public good is non-excludable and non-rival, so for example one security guard, the total marginal benefit for the whole community of three individuals would be the sum of their for example individual cases, marginal benefit of A plus marginal benefit of B plus marginal benefit of C. So this is how the demand for a pure public good would be different from a pure private good. Since this is a little bit different from the microeconomic analysis that you might have done before, I would prefer to repeat that again. Then we would have a summary in the end, and I hope this repetition would actually endorse that concept into your minds. Now, in case of when we were discussing the demand for a private good and comparing it with the demand for a public good, then in case of demand for private good, we had a graph in which on x-axis we had the quantity demanded, and on y-axis we had price of the product. So at a given price, each individual would demand a different quantity. Each individual demanding a different quantity at a different price would mean that at a given price every individual has his own demand curve. Since every individual has his own demand curve, so at a given price he would request for a different quantity. So in creating that example for loaves of bread as a pure private good, we started with that, for example, the market price is 3. At that market price, each individual A, B and C would demand a different quantity, and the horizontal summation of individual demand curves is actually the market demand curve. Why horizontal summation? Because we need to sum the quantities and not the prices. So if we are summing the quantities, that would mean that at a given market price of $3, the market demand would be the demands of those three individuals, which came up as 1 plus 2 plus 3, that was 6. So at that given market price, each individual was demanding his own quantity, and the total market demand was 6 at price 3, and that was equal to the total marginal benefit to the community, for example, if we treat those three individuals as a community, and that was at the point of equilibrium, that was equal to marginal social benefit. Now, coming back to demand for a pure public good, the scenario is completely different from that. Why? On the x-axis there is the quantity demanded, or in this case it is security guards per week, but on the y-axis it is not the prices of the products, but it is the marginal benefit that each individual derives. So it is basically the willingness of each individual to pay for that given amount of the public good or the pure public good. Since it is a pure public good, so we started with the basic assumption that if only one individual hires that security guard, one single security guard, then since it is non-excludable and non-rival, non-excludability would mean that individual B and C would also derive the benefit from it. So the issue is over here that how much everybody would be willing to pay for it. So this is a voluntary scenario. Each individual is assumed to pay for the amount exactly equal to the marginal benefit that he says that I derive from the use of this pure public good. So in this scenario, we would be adding up each individual's marginal benefit for that given quantity of public good. In this case, for example, the first case, the marginal benefit for one security guard was the summation of marginal benefit for one security guard of each of the individuals A, B and C, and that creates the total demand curve sloping downwards again for demand for a public good, which is represented by points Z1, Z2, Z3 and Z4 for each of 1, 2, 3 or 4 security guards, and also showing that it is the sum of marginal benefits of all the individuals. And secondly, it is a downward sloping demand curve. We already discussed that in terms of marginal benefit, the more the product is available, the marginal benefit being derived from it also diminishes. That's why this is also a downward sloping demand curve. So now if this is the efficient level of output of a pure public good, then if this is how the demand curve for pure public good is derived, then what would be the efficient output of a pure public good? Now that is again a questionable scenario. The social as mentioned in the slide, you can see socially optimal level of the public good requires that we set the marginal social benefit of that good equal to the marginal social cost. Which we have discussed in earlier lectures also, that marginal social benefit should always be equal to marginal social cost. Why? Because when marginal social benefit is greater than marginal social cost, there is positive externality and more of the good should be produced, and when marginal social cost is greater than marginal social benefit, then there is a negative externality and the goods quantity should be reduced. So what is marginal social benefit in this case? Marginal social benefits is the sum of all the individual marginal social benefits. In our three individual community example, it would be marginal social benefit of A, marginal social benefit of B and marginal social benefit of C. So all these sum up to be marginal social benefit or the complete marginal social benefit, which should be equal to marginal social cost. Now there is a concept of Lind-Hall pricing that we would be discussing in detail a little bit more. In this scenario, everyone in a group cooperates and pays their marginal social benefit. Now the basic assumption behind this example is that since marginal social benefit is an intrinsic value that an individual derives from the use of a public good, so everyone would honestly and truthfully define the marginal social benefit or explain or put it on the table that this is how much social benefit I derive from the use of one more unit of the public good. So this is one major assumptions, and we would also debate that later on, that how this assumption again creates a problem in our cooperative scenario. So this is a cooperation model given by a Swedish economist, Lind-Hall. Lind-Hall pricing says everyone in a group cooperates and pays their marginal benefit. Now we can demonstrate this issue mathematically, numerically, using a table and graphically. Graphically is at some level we have already discussed that, but we would also take it up on the mathematical and numerical grounds. Now from the figure you can see demand for pure public goods, which we discussed earlier, that the marginal social benefit for a pure public good is the sum of individual marginal social benefits. That was marginal in our three community example, where there are only three individuals A, B, C. Marginal social benefit is the sum of individual marginal benefits. Now you would be wondering why I repeat stuff again and again, because it is very necessary that you guys grasp these concepts for the exam when you take up this course, because it is very difficult to convince you guys to watch these videos again and again. So what I can do is like repeat the stuff, the most important stuff again and again, in order to like imprint that on your mind. So that is why the most important concepts are usually repeated by me over here. So marginal social benefit is basically the sum of individual marginal benefits, and that is how the demand for pure public good is calculated. Now efficient output level would be at where marginal social benefit or the sum of individual marginal social benefits is equal to marginal social cost, and that is the efficient level of production in terms of welfare for every individual in the society, which we had discussed in previous lectures, and I repeated that stuff again and again so that that is again imprinted on your mind, and I hope I was successful in imprinting all that stuff in your mind, and now you would be clearer on the concept that marginal social benefit should be equal to marginal social cost. Why? Because if marginal social benefit is greater than marginal social cost, there is a positive externality and the use of the product should be increased, like we discussed in the case of vaccinations. And when there is when marginal social benefit is less than marginal social cost, or marginal social cost is greater than marginal social benefit, then there should be a decrease in the quantity of that product, and that can be done through taxation, and that is a negative externality. That is how we deal with the negative externality, or the government. I mean, we would mean the government, because we vote for the government and choose the government, so that is we. Now, numerically, suppose we have three people who are discussing the issue of hiring a security guard. Going back to the same graphical example, now we are going to take it up numerically. Note that each person places a different value on the levels of the security guard. That would mean that each individual has a different marginal benefit derived from each security guard. Now this numerical example would be clarifying your concept very clearly. Now on the top row there is number of security guards per week. The columns represents 1, 2 and 3 and 4 security guards, and on each row would represent, the first row is representing, in fact the third row number 3 is marginal benefit for A for each number of security guards. That marginal benefit is decreasing, as we discussed that marginal benefit from the public goods would decrease when more of the public good is available. So then the second one is marginal benefit for B, and the third one is for marginal benefit for C, and each of these marginal benefits are represented over here for different numbers of security guards per week, which is 1, 2, 3 and up to 4 security guards. Now in this example we have further assumed that if the cost of security guards is for each security guard is 450 per week. Now considering Lindhal's scenario and Lindhal's pricing, how would these individuals reach to the point where, and what would be the optimal level of the number of security guards? We already discussed that optimal level of security guards would be where marginal social benefit would be equal to marginal social cost. Now in this example, what would be the marginal benefit of security guard number 1? Yes, very true. That would be, for example, the sum of marginal benefit of A, marginal benefit of B and marginal benefit of C, as we saw in that graph also. So for the first case, for the first security guard, A assigns the value of $300 to the marginal benefit that he is gaining from the first security guard. B is assigning the value of $250 for the first security guard, and C is assigning the value of $200 for the first security guard, and the sum is $750. Now this is difference. There is now I hope now you understand the difference between when you calculate the demand for pure private goods, in which we added the quantity demanded rather than the price, because the price was fixed, and at that price each individual was demanding a different quantity, and when we sum that up we calculate the quantity. But in this case we are summing up, for example, the marginal benefit that the individual is deriving from each individual is deriving for the given quantity of the pure public good. Now for example, since the marginal benefit is diminishing in every aspect for A, B and C, so it is diminishing for the total marginal benefit. For the second security guard, there the marginal benefit of A has reduced to $250. For the third security guard it has reduced to $200, and for the fourth security guard it has reduced to $150. Similarly, for marginal benefit of B, the marginal benefit for second security guard is $200, and marginal benefit of C for the second security guard is $150, and the total quantity, marginal benefit has reduced from $750 to $600. Now this again, as I repeat, it represents the downward sloping demand curve in terms of pure public goods also, because marginal benefit being derived is decreasing. Now in case of for example third case, the marginal, when we sum up the marginal benefit, that is equal to 450 for the total of these individuals, and for fourth security guard it is 300. Now what would you assume, like if for example what would be the optimal scenario over here? What would they choose? That is why I keep repeating stuff, that we would choose the point where marginal benefit is equal to marginal social benefit is equal to marginal social cost. So ideally the group should hire 3 security guards, because the cost per security guard or marginal social cost is $450 per week, and at 3 security guards their marginal social benefit sums up to $450. So at this point marginal social benefit would be equal to marginal social cost. So that is why the group should hire 3 security guards. Now always remember that when in academia or in theoretical understanding of the various concepts, we always give numerical examples in a way so that we can identify the equilibrium point very easily. There might be often cases when there is a surplus amount available or when there is a deficit, and in that case those cooperating individuals would find ways and means to use that quantity as well. Now hiring 3 security guards at the rate of 450, that would come up to 1350 for the total amount, out of which each individual would pay a different amount. Person A pays 600 at the rate of 200 per guard, person B pays 450, $150 per guard, and person C pays 300, and which is $100 per security guard. Now you see, in case of this voluntary cooperation sort of environment, everybody is only paying the amount which is not more than their marginal benefit that they are deriving out of it, and each individual is paying a different amount. They are not all, the amount is not being equally divided, and we would discuss that later on, because this voluntary cooperation scenario might work when there are 2 individuals, and even in that case the case is doubtful, because the 2 individuals defining their marginal benefit in real scenarios would be very difficult, and we would come to resolve the issue how this can be resolved. Now the same graph is represented over here, where we added marginal benefits of each individuals to show a downward sloping demand curve. The values on the x-axis is security guards per week, while the values on y-axis is marginal benefit in terms of dollars, marginal benefit which have individuals very voluntarily defined that this is the marginal benefit for me for each security guard. And the equilibrium point is at the rate of $450, which was the marginal social cost or marginal cost of hiring each security guard. It is like parallel to x-axis, represented by marginal cost. Now marginal social benefit, when added up, it at 3 security guards it turns out to be 450, and the individuals decide to hire 3 security guards, and that is represented by point E on this graph at equilibrium, and equilibrium is represented by point A, where the sum of individual marginal social benefits represents a total marginal social benefit, and represented by a downward sloping demand curve D, and it intersects marginal cost at exactly the point that we defined, which is like at 3 security guards it is 450 per security guard. Now taking this up, national defense is like a classical example of pure public defense, and defense spending as a percentage of GDP has been changing across time in USA. Like it fell from above 8% during the Vietnam War era to just 5% in late 1970s. Then Reagan started building up its defense again in 1980s, and it fell 5% below 5% with the demise of Soviet Union. Then the amount of public defense rose again in terms of first with the war on Iraq, and then with the war on terror, where US invasions took place first in case of Iraq and then took up to Afghanistan. Now, from public policy perspectives, this is from 1966 to 1999. The graph represents defense purchases as a percentage of GDP. Now, it shows what we have highlighted earlier, that defense purchases later on went down. But then the parliament sanctioned, or like the House of Representatives sanctioned further expenditure by the government in terms of war on Iraq and for war on terror. Now, since we have discussed the Lindhal's expenditure, the amount each person contributes, now what we want to do is we want to generalize the whole concept of Lindhal equilibrium. Now, the amount each person contributes, TI, depends on their individual desire for the public goods. This is the scenario in which we assumed that each individual very honestly expresses the marginal benefit he or she derives from the use of that pure public good. So each individual contributes some amount to that. In previous example, we saw that different individuals were paying different amounts for the use of the security guard facility, and each one of them were paying in terms of the marginal benefit that they derive from the use of that facility. So in this case, the amount each person contributes, T, depends on their individual desire for the public good. So they would individually define how much public good they would, how much marginal benefit that public good is giving them. So in other words, the sum of contribution equals the total cost of the public good. How? It should be equal to the total cost of public good, because the sum of T, their individual amounts that they define, we are trying to generalize the previous three individual community example. The sum of their contribution equals the total cost of the public good. Now that would be T into the Q star. Q star represents the total quantity, given quantity available of that pure public good. So T would be the voluntary contribution that they are doing, each individual is doing, and the sum of T into Q, the quantity they are using, the marginal social benefit, the marginal benefit that each individual is driving multiplied by the quantity he is using, should be equal to the marginal cost of producing an additional unit of that public good, and that would be equal to average cost of that public good. So in terms of generalizing this scenario that we discussed, the Lindhal's equilibrium, that would be sum of T should be equal to the marginal cost and average cost, which was clearly shown in that example, where the individual demand curves, when they summed up, they showed that for 3 security guards there would be $450 would be hired, 3 security guards would be hired at $450 per security guard in terms of marginal cost. It was fixed because the amount that each security guard was demanding was $450, so it was a straight line parallel to x-axis, and the demand curves, when were added in terms of marginal benefits, the point of intersection was represented by E in those slides. So if we put that notation mathematically over here, algebraically, that would be sum of T, the contribution each individual is willing to make, and equal to MC, which is the marginal cost of each security guard, which would be equal to the average cost. Now, since we are considering that average cost for hiring security guards would remain the same at $450. Now, all individuals, the main point is that all the individuals are willing to pay in this scenario. The amount that each individual, there are, like in this Lindhal's equilibrium, there are 3 conditions which are mentioned over here. The amount each person contributes depends on their individual desire for the public good, and each individual would get a specific amount of the public good that they intend to use for that amount they contribute. And then the sum of the contributions equals the total cost of the public good, or the total marginal cost and average cost. And the third one is that all the individuals agree to pay their share voluntarily. Now these are the 3 conditions under which Lindhal equilibrium would hold. Now there are often scenarios in which such a condition would not hold, because for example, when we discuss this scenario in terms of 3 individual community where discussions is a very optimal scenario, and they can just like in the case of externalities we discussed, that when individuals are less in number and there are only two parties involved in terms of having their property rights, when government defines property rights, then two can negotiate out the optimal condition, and it might disturb the income distribution, but then the market would be producing efficiently. Now, there were two examples, like the farmer example, in which the community which developed housing amenities in the area. In that case, the farmers and such a huge number of community would be again a problem, and just assigning the property rights would not resolve the situation. And similar case was again discussed when there was a case when in US cities where there is too much concrete and roads, there is problem of flooding. Now, street flooding basically. So the people living over there, already the old residents always would object for the new development in the area, because that would in fact enhance the problem of flooding. So when there are like just a few individuals, the matter is resolved easily just by assigning the property rights. But when the number of parties or the number of individuals or third party are not organized, then the problem is not resolved by merely allocating the property rights. So in this scenario, Lindhall equilibrium would people would voluntarily paying for the amount of public good they use, or specifically not the amount but the marginal benefit they derive from the public good. Even in three individuals, it is very problematic that if one of the individuals does not honestly define how much marginal benefit they would derive from that public good, then reaching that equilibrium would be very difficult. And even if he is not voluntarily willing to pay for the use of that public good, so in this case, Lindhall equilibrium would be difficult to reach when there is, for example, when one of the individuals or few of the individuals is not willing to pay for that good. So let's assume that there are more number of individuals. For example, there is a whole big community consisting of thousands of individuals. Then it would be next to impossible to reach to a Lindhall equilibrium in that scenario. And why is that? Because there are cases when there are free riders. Free riding occurs when people are not honest in stating their marginal benefit, because if they understate it, they can get a slightly reduced level of public good while paying nothing for it. That is how free riding would distort the Lindhall equilibrium. In this case, specifically, if one of the individuals is not willing to clearly define the marginal benefit that he derives, maybe individual C he understates the marginal benefit, then he would be getting the same amount of security at a lesser cost to him. So that automatically gives incentives to individuals to understate the marginal benefit. And then if there are large number of individuals, just like in case of we discussed when the case was of negative externality of street flooding, that there are large number of developers and there is a large number of old residents, and if one of the residents strikes a deal, then there is the issue is not still resolved. So in this case also, when there are large number of individuals, and if a significant number of individuals refuse to identify their marginal benefit derived from the use of the pure public good, then Lindhall equilibrium would not be identified in that system. And secondly, even if many individuals understate the marginal benefit they derive from the use of that pure public good, then the total amount of pure public good would again be an issue, because the total amount of pure public good, its marginal cost, marginal social cost or average cost should be equal to the sum of marginal social benefits. So if some of the individuals do not identify their marginal social benefits clearly, then the sum of marginal social benefits would not be equal to marginal cost or average cost. So free riding is again a big problem system, and this would again be synonymous to use to make me discuss the case of shadow economy. I have already highlighted that shadow economy is a case when certain individuals, business entities or individuals do not pay taxes. Now, government is a machinery that operates on its tax revenue. When government operates on its tax revenue, then there is a need for the government to meet its operational expenditure, for maybe giving subsidies, for maybe giving for maybe financing the national defense, or giving police services, or monitoring all the services like postal services, or utility services, or building dams maybe. So government needs the revenue for that. So if certain individuals do not pay, for example, taxes, and they evade taxes, which is the whole topic of tax evasion, which is shadow economy or unofficial economy, when they evade taxes, then they are using those public goods without having to pay for it. And for that reason, the burden of taxation, maybe if the government goes under deficit because of those individuals not paying their taxes, the burden next time would go on the individuals who do pay their taxes, and the tax rates would be increased by the government to finance the deficit. And that is just common sense. So based on that, the free riders are using all those public sector services or public goods. They are using the electricity, they are using the roads being built by the government, they are using like postal services at a cheaper subsidized rates, they are using electricity at subsidized rates and natural gas at subsidized rates, but then they are not willing to pay for the subsidy, they only pay for the cost of that good. So the payment of that subsidy comes from the taxes and is borne as an expenditure by the government, and that expenditure is financed by the revenue, and that these business entities or individuals or economic agents skip that responsibility of theirs. So free riding is easier specifically when there are large number of individuals. Like anonymity, if everyone knows who contributes, there can be powerful social stigmas applied to shrinkers. Like if there is a community of 10 or 20 individuals maybe, then people are well aware of each other's incomes and each other's marginal benefit. It is a possibility. So such kind of communities are easier to handle when, like for example, often in smaller communities in our country, Pakistan also, there are cases when the smaller communities gather up together and they collect funds for maybe sanitation or, for example, provision of water facility and certain those activities, and maybe certain people living together in a street would pay for a security guard. Now, if those payments are made on voluntary basis and voluntary basis, and if those payments are just based on the marginal benefit each individual derives from the use of security guard or from the use of a mosque, then the running expenditure might not be met, because in that cases people would be might be free riding. But if it is a small community, then individuals would know about each other, so there is no anonymity. But if the community increases, for example, if you try to get contribution from out of a whole city for security payments out of their marginal benefits, then most of the people or many people would be free riding, and you would not know if they actually are hiding the marginal benefit they are deriving, or they are understating their marginal benefits, or they are being honest in terms of the marginal benefit that they derive from the use of that pure public good. Now then, the second issue, free riding, why it gets easier, because large number of people, it is easier to determine the shirkers in a small group, and the punishment is more profound when people close to you shun you. In that case, again the similar case out of anonymity, when the group of people is small, it is very easy to identify the free riders, and just out of social burden they might pay the relevant amount. But if it is a large number of people, it becomes difficult to take out payments from them. So this is where the government might come into the scenario. Like for example, there are fixed amounts of payments in certain cases, like there are often conformity taxes by the government. Like if there is a public good being provided, public good being provided by the government, the free riders would be taxed, so that if there is a fixed amount of payment that everybody has to pay in the community and nobody is asked about the marginal benefit they would be deriving, then maybe the cost of that payment can be cost of that social service, or cost marginal social cost can be calculated out of it. Now can be borne out of it, of all those payments. But if you leave it to the people in a large community to derive their to make payments out of their own dollar value of marginal social benefit, then it would be very difficult to meet those payments. So Lind-Hall's equilibrium is fine, so just like government defining the property rights of few individuals in a smaller conflict case, but when larger communities and large number of people are involved in a group, then that would result into for example free riders. Now another case for voluntary contribution was a Gulf War, when Iraq started the Gulf War and it invaded Kuwait. Then considering it a global threat, many countries united their forces and expenses in order to eradicate that threat. So under the premises, defeating Iraq was a public good to be consumed by the industrialized economies who considered it as a threat on themselves as well as the Arab nations, and each nation was expected to contribute. Now each and every nation actually contributed to the overall expense of the war, and US and UK contributed the bulk of fighting forces. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, United Arab Emirates, Japan and Germany voluntarily paid $54 billion of estimated $61 billion cost, and the rest of the cost was borne by USA and UK, of course. And this statistic have been derived from David Hyman's book that I recommended as a textbook in my earlier slides. So in this slide we discussed the voluntary contribution, but then this was a different sort of an example where war on Iraq was treated as a public good. But then again going back to sort of assuming that everybody would voluntarily pay for the use of pure public good would be very difficult hypothesis to prove, because when communities grow larger and when number of individuals involved grow larger, the involvement of free riding would be almost next to avoiding free riding would almost be next to impossible. So to avoid this scenario, governments often use compulsory taxes and compulsory payments and fees and levies, so that anybody using that facility or not using that facility would be taxed for that, and specifically anybody using that facility. And secondly, there are certain services like police services and electricity, those are like and transport uses are packaged and distributed to the customers against, like they are properly sold against the price, so that there are no free riders in that case. And when there are certain taxes by the government which are compulsory finance. Now just consider that this is the case where voter is like does not choose to be compulsorily taxed by the government, but he is told that he is being taxed. So later on we would take up this taxation scenario to build up how people would vote, considering the use of the pure public good, and then being taxed for that, and then the marginal benefit that he derives in terms of whenever he is being taxed for that good. So in this lecture we discuss the case where there are pure public goods and what would be the demand for pure public goods. In the last lecture we started with pure public goods and we defined pure public and pure private goods, and then we defined how they are produced and made available to the community. But then the controversial, maybe the very interesting topic of what would be the pure demand for the pure public good. Now, we discussed that the pure public goods demand is different from how the demand for a pure private good is estimated. Pure private goods demand is estimated based on the demand curve, individual downward sloping demand curve, where on x-axis there are price of the product, and based on individual demands, each individual's considers an inverse sloping demand curve, where when there is increase in the price, they decrease the quantity being used, and that is how the relationship or negative relationship of price and quantity demanded works under economics. And it is like a real life scenario. Of course it is applicable. It is a law of demand basically. So then the total demand for the pure private good would be the sum of horizontal summation of individual demands. Because what we do is, at that given price originating in the market, we see that how much each individual would demand. We considered 3 individuals, and all of them demanded, their demand added up to 6 loaves of bread, with the example that we were discussing. And at the price of $3, they were considering like 6 loaves of bread. Now, based on that, we define that this is how the demand for pure private goods is calculated, and then we saw the difference how the demand for pure public good is calculated. Now, pure public goods case is very different. Why? Because in case of a pure public good, on the x-axis there is the quantity being demanded of the pure public good, and on the y-axis it is not the price of pure public good, because we already discussed in the last lecture, it is very difficult to price non-excludable and non-rival sort of a product, specifically non-excludable. So since a pure public good is not non-excludable, then the result would be that on the y-axis there would be the marginal benefit each individual derives from the use of that product. So each individual would, at a given quantity of public good, it would be, marginal benefit would be how much each individual is willing to pay for that good, for that given quantity. So what we do is, we do not sum the quantity, because pure public good is available in a given quantity. Each individual would derive certain marginal benefit out of it, and would declare that marginal benefit voluntarily, and they would actually add up the marginal benefit of each individual, and that would be the total, or the sum of individual marginal benefits should be the marginal social benefit. And whenever, as per considering our previous conditions of efficiency, the productive efficiency, we said that the optimal level of production should be where everybody is better off, in a sense that marginal social benefit would be equal to marginal social cost. So marginal cost of having that product, in this example we considered a community of 3 individuals, and their requirement for hiring security guards. Now in that case, the price of the security guard per week was $450, and somehow the 3 individuals in the community had marginal social benefit of different levels, and they voluntarily expressed their marginal social benefits, and those were added up to find an equilibrium point where marginal social benefit was equal to marginal social cost, and that equilibrium point originated at 3 security guards per week. Now, since there was again further a debate on this, that whether we also did this example numerically as well as we did this example mathematically, then we derived a general condition for Lindhal's equilibrium. Lindhal was a Swedish economist who provided an equilibrium condition in which individuals would voluntarily express their marginal social benefits, and or in fact marginal benefits, individual marginal benefits, or private marginal private benefits, and those would add up to marginal social benefits. So there were 3 conditions in which each individual's marginal private benefit would be exactly equal to the given amount of public good that they would be using. In other words, they would be voluntarily expressing that. The second condition was that the sum of those marginal marginal benefits, which was equal to marginal social benefit, should be equal to the marginal cost of providing that pure public good, and or the average cost of pure public good. And the third condition was that each individual was voluntarily expressing their marginal benefit. Then we came up to the point where we discussed that the scenario is optimal when we have three individuals, because then in a smaller community it is very easy to identify the level of income of each individual, the sources of income. It is very easy to identify, for example, or at least assume how much marginal benefit that individual is deriving from the use of that pure public good. But if that community increases to maybe thousands or a greater number, the issue would be how much marginal social benefit each individual is deriving. And then the problem arose with the existence of free riders. Now those free riders would be the individuals who are willing to use that product but are not willing to pay for that product. Now when they are not willing to pay for that product, those individuals would be either hiding or understating their marginal benefit from the use of that product. Now why would they do that? Because then in that case, even if they are not paying for it, and even if they are understating their marginal benefit, they would be only voluntarily paying the amount which is less than their actual benefit derived, and they would still be using that product. And in that case, equilibrium would not be reached and the scenario would change. In our three case example, where there were three individuals, A, B and C, if for example individual C maybe refuses to use that product or voluntarily pay for that product, but still the product is non-excludable, so he cannot be excluded from it, and the other two individuals would be bearing the total amount that they would need to, against which they would need to hire those three security guards, and optimal equilibrium level would not be reached at 3 security guards maybe. So free riders create a problem, and under this I also expressed the issue of for example at an aggregate level where there is shadow economy and unofficial sector, which we will be discussing again later on. Shadow economy and unofficial sector is where individuals and entities do not pay taxes. They take up, for example, even illegal economic activities through which they use the resources of the legal sector, but they cannot in fact pay for it because they are in illegal domain. But what the example we specifically focused on are those people where they just avoid paying taxes while using those facilities, and the burden of taxation is transferred to the people who are paying the taxes. This would again be an example of Lind-Hall equilibrium not working. So not working in a bigger community, because when the community grows bigger, there is a higher possibility of individuals taking up free riding and taking up or understating their marginal benefit. So this whole situation of voluntarily paying for the marginal benefit you derive might work in a smaller community or in a number of people when you have direct contact with each and every individual, but when there is anonymity and there are large number of individuals, this method would not work. And then we introduced a concept of government intervention, where they would put up compulsory taxes on certain cases where they want to finance such expenses finance such expenses of providing those pure public goods. And then another scenario would be, other than the compulsory taxes, we also identified that government can also package and sell those public goods so that people have to pay for the use of that public good. And one example would be, for example, the postal service or transport service, and in that case people pay for the use of their product directly. And since this sort of taxation is where the individual or the the policy maker I voted for is telling me to pay the tax, so that also affects my voting behavior, which we would discuss in later chapters, that how voting behavior is affected by this sort of taxation. And then in the last part of this lecture, we discussed the case of Gulf War when, for example, Iraq started to invade Kuwait. Then there was a whole group of countries who voluntarily paid for stopping that invasion, where UK and USA provided most of the forces, while 3-4 countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Japan and Germany voluntarily paid $55 billion of the total estimated $61 billion cost for stopping that invasion against USA. Now this was an example of voluntary contribution of a public good, because public good would be, since the USA would be stopping an invasion, that would create a positive externality for all the surrounding countries, because at that time it was the invasion of Iraq on Kuwait was considered as a threat to the surrounding nations, also the Arab nations. So they all joined hands together and most of them paid to stopping that invasion. Now that was a voluntary payment, and it is assumed in this case that that voluntary payment would be equal to the sum of that voluntary payment would be the sum of individual marginal benefits derived by each country for stopping that invasion. Now, all of this said and done, we finished with this lecture, and I hope that this interesting field of public finance would be of interest to you, and you would soon join me for the next lecture. Thank you.